All right, so this Knife Thoughts video is going to be a review of this knife, and this is the Sencut Scepter. Now, first of all, Sencut sent this knife to me for review, so I really appreciate that. Sencut is a company that I became aware of relatively recently. Another person with a YouTube channel, Mark Kaufman, was willing to loan me a Sencut knife, the Sidious, and then I purchased the Sencut Snap, did a review of it, and Sencut actually reached out to me asking if I would be interested in reviewing the Scepter. So that's how I got this knife, and again, I really do appreciate Sencut sending this knife along. So if you are interested in a budget-friendly, very EDC-friendly knife, this might be a great video for you. So normally when I do a video on a knife, I talk about the price towards the end of the video. But being that this is a budget knife, I want to talk about it at the beginning here. So Sencut is a new brand that is another sister brand of WE Knives. So if you're familiar with WE Knives, you probably are also familiar with their sister brand, the previous sister brand of WE Knives, Civivi Knives. I'm a big fan of Civivi knives. I think they're a great value, and they were kind of originally the budget brand for WE Knives. But Civivi has kind of branched out. They've been doing Damascus and some higher end stuff, and they're usually in the $50 to $100 range. So Sencut is a brand that recently came out that the knives seem to be under $50. So a little bit more budget friendly, staying under that $50 mark, and just another sister company to WE Knives. Now, an interesting thing with Sencut is that from talking with them and from what I've seen so far, it seems like they will only be selling through Amazon and their website directly, which is actually just fulfilled by Amazon. So that's an interesting difference in that these are not sold by knife dealers. They can only be gotten on Amazon. And this knife in particular is about $42.50. That's what it is right now on Amazon. And that's, what it generally is, although they do sometimes, I've seen them go on sale. So definitely under $50, but not a huge drop in price from some other Civivi knives. Now, Civivi knives, like I said, range from 50 to 100, but there are definitely some options in the, upper 40s, lower 50s range from Civivi. So it's an interesting new brand that is a sister brand to WE Knives. As for the quality of this knife, it's really good. So like I said, I am a fan of Civivi knives and WE Knives also, but I think Civivi knives are a really great value, and I've been really impressed with Civivi construction. So this is the third Sencut knife that I have had in my possession. The first was loaned by Mark Kaufman. The second is the Snap, and they have all been really good quality and very much reminiscent of Civivi knives. In traditional knives, which if you follow my channel, I'm very into traditional knives also, we say you read the knife, not the tang, or not what it says on the knife. And that's the case here. If you look at this knife, if it didn't say Sencut on it, I think you would think that it was a Civivi knife. Not necessarily a WE knife, but definitely a Civivi knife. And the reasons for that is that it has the same nice type machining. So you can see the handle does have some machining here on both sides. It does have micarta handles. This is the gray micarta version. So, not cheap handles, definitely nice micarta. The construction of the knife itself with the pillars, the standoffs, is very Civivi-esque. It has the same type jimping. Now, one difference between Civivi and Sencut is the Sencuts don't have this branded pivot, but the grinds themselves on the blade are very similar to those on Civivi knives. They have the same nice crisp, but not, crisp, but polished corners or transitions. It is really well ground to a nice thin edge like Civivi knives. It has a ball bearing pivot that is very smooth like Civivi. Now, I will say that the detent on this Scepter is not quite as snappy and perfectly dialed in as I've seen on Civivi knives or other Sencut knives, to be completely honest. The detent on this Snap and on the Sidious that I had, or that was loaned to me, is a little bit snappier. I did take this knife apart to see if I could adjust it at all and make it a little bit more snappy. but it seems to have stayed pretty much the same. So this is really the same action that it came with. Just wanted to mention that it's not quite as snappy as, you know, I've come to see on other Civivis and Sencut knives, but I would guess that it's an anomaly, being that I've had, you know, over 10 other knives from Civivi and Sencut, well over 10, I guess, and they all have really great action, and this is just slightly worse. Now, when I say slightly worse, it's still really good action as compared to, you know, other, you know, budget knives. It's better than most, but it is not quite as good as others from Sencut and Civivi that I've seen. Still really good, still very easy to flip open with the thumb stud as well as with the flipper, but every now and then, if you, well, of course I'm not gonna be able to show it, but every now and then, if you are really light with the flipper, it will not go out the whole way. So you do have to give it a little bit of a flip there with your finger, but as long as you do it normally, it does flip out every time. So that's the one basically imperfection. Everything else is really nice. One other thing I noticed about the construction of this knife is that the screws are really kind of burly and tough seeming. They are pretty like thick screws, which is an interesting thing. And overall, just really well made. It is very much a Civivi quality type knife, even, you know, notwithstanding the slightly less snappy detent. Now, as for the design of this knife, I think it's a really EDC focused design. And what I mean by that is that this is a pretty small knife. So I want to give you some comparisons. So one of the most commonly recommended and well-liked EDC knives now, I think, is the Civivi Elementum. So you can see that the Scepter is very similar in length. You get pretty close to the same amount of edge length, and the handles are pretty close to the same length, but the Scepter is much less tall. The Elementum is a wider knife, so it'll take up even less space in your pocket. And then another recent Civivi is the Baby Banter. The Baby Banter is definitely shorter, but again, taller, so it will take up a little bit of pocket space. And then here is a Spyderco Jester, the same size as a Ladybug, just as a comparison there. So it's a very EDC friendly size with its just under 3-inch blade. The specs say it's a 2.97-inch blade, which means that in places where, you know, you can't have over 3 inches as a blade, this might be a good option. The other thing that I like about the design for EDC friendliness is the deep carry clip. You can see that pretty much none of the handle is going to stick out above your pocket, so it's pretty low profile. The other thing is that this is a 2-opening method knife. So I already talked about the flipper, and it flips well, even though it's maybe not as snappy as other Civivi or Sencut knives that I've had. But it also has the thumb stud here, and I like the thumb stud quite a bit, actually. One cool thing that I wanted to show about the thumb stud is that it has a really interesting machining pattern to it. It's like a swirl that goes all the way around the face of the thumb stud. So I like that. And as for the blade shape, it is kind of an interesting, almost like a Zulu spear. If you're familiar with traditional knives, this is what you might call a Zulu spear blade shape in traditional knives. Probably would just be called a drop point in modern knives, but I like it a lot. It's a very practical blade shape because you get some straight edge and then a really nice gradual belly and a usable tip there. And I do like the drawn swedge on both sides of the blade and the fact that it's ground nice and thin for slicing, which is, again, a common, you know, quality characteristic of Civivi and Sencut knives. The handle is a little bit short for my hand. When I first got it, I was concerned that I wouldn't like the handle, but I've found that in this type of grip, what you might call hammer grip or whatever, I pretty much just get a 3-finger grip. My pinky finger slides off of it. But what you actually use a knife in more, the grip that you use a knife in more, is like a pinch grip, and it's actually really comfortable in that. So my pinky ring and middle finger go on it, and then the thumb and index finger pinch here at the pivot, and you can cut really well. So honestly, in actual use, I didn't find the handle to be too small. It worked well. I didn't have any times where I was like, oh, I really wish this handle was shaped differently. And I think, as I say in a lot of my videos, that that's probably because even though it's a smaller handle, it's a relatively simple shaped handle, and a simple shaped handle makes for an ergonomic handle. So I do, even though it's a little small for my hand, I think that it works well. And the design overall is, pretty typical. It's not a super exotic shape to the handle or the blade. I think it's very practical. The handle is big enough that it covers the blade. You don't have to worry about that tip sitting proud at all. But it is big enough that you can definitely use this for EDC tasks. You can see that the edge sits just in front of the thumb stud, so the thumb stud shouldn't get in the way of cutting. And with this, Zulu spear type blade shape, it will work for most types of EDC tasks. So I do appreciate the design for its practicality. So what are my overall thoughts on the Sencut Scepter? Well, I'm a fan. I've enjoyed using it and carrying it, and I think that it's a nice little knife. I like that there are different handle options. So like I said, this is the gray micarta. I really do like this micarta a lot. It is definitely a rougher micarta than most that you see, especially on budget knives. So I really appreciate that. It gives it some definite tackiness that gives you some texture. Now, just a note here, this discoloration right here, it didn't come on the knife. It's Loctite that I got some of it on the handle. So don't worry about that. The handles came, very evenly and nicely colored. Same deal over here. That's just Loctite. I like the handle. I like the blade shape. I think that it's cool to see this type of blade shape on a modern knife. And I appreciate that it has those two opening methods, so that even though the detent is not as perfectly and snappily dialed in as on other Sencut and Civivi knives, it's gonna open pretty much every time. You can open it quick with the flipper, quick with the thumb stud, and you can also, if you want to have a little bit less flair to it, you can also just open it slow with that thumb stud, which is a nice option to have, I think. It's also made well. It didn't come completely perfectly centered, but it is nowhere near rubbing. It came with no blade play at all, and after adjusting it, really taking it apart, it again has no blade play. Very, very smooth opening and closing. It's just the detent is not quite as snappy as other knives, but the smoothness is definitely there. As you can see, it drops closed easily. And I think that it's a good value. I think that $42.50 is a good value for what you get here, having a micarta handle, which it's cool to have micarta on a modern knife. Having a reasonably good steel. I didn't mention the steel yet. It is 9CR18 MOV. Not a high-end steel. I'm not trying to tell you that. It is a lower-end steel, but it's not a terrible steel. I mean, it is going to work fine for EDC. You just have to make sure that you wipe it off. It's not the most stainless of stainless steels. It certainly isn't the highest edge wear resistance of stainless steels out there today, but will work fine and is definitely easy to sharpen. I have sharpened it since getting it. So, I think that it's a good value. I think that it's a nice little knife, a good design, and especially if you are looking for an EDC sized and type knife. I really like the Sencut Snap because it's a bigger knife. I do, like a bigger modern knife. I like the handle and everything, but that's a little bit aggressive looking, and some of Sencut's other knives are also a little bit more aggressive looking. So if you want a knife with Civivi quality, maybe a little bit more budget friendly and with a more EDC friendly size, then the Scepter I think will be a good option for you. I've certainly enjoyed getting to carry and use it, and I do appreciate Sencut sending it along for review. I'm looking forward to what Sencut has to offer in the future. I think that it's a good thing for the knife market to have these companies that we know make good knives bringing out budget-friendly knives, and I would love to see from Sencut something even a little bit more budget-friendly. So this is a Ruik or Rake, however you say it, P801. Different materials for sure, but $30-ish. I would be very interested to see what Sencut, or but Sencut could do in the $30 range, or even $35 range, a little bit lower than $40. I'd really be interested to see that. So I am looking forward to what Sencut brings out in the future, and definitely will be keeping my eye on this new sister brand for Wii. So I appreciate Sencut sending along the Scepter for review. If you want to get one, like I say, the best place to get it is Amazon, and you can also get them directly from their website. But it is a very EDC and budget-friendly knife. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and you can subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you know when I post new videos. Also, make sure you check out my social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Knife Thoughts, and my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.